In the early 20th century, the Methodist Episcopal Church in Texas grew rapidly. As it grew, it became increasingly concerned with social issues, establishing orphanages, homes for unwed mothers, and hospitals. Then came the stock market crash of 1929. It crippled much of the nation. It devastated the rural South. 65% of impoverished Methodist members couldn't contribute to the church in 1934, the same year the church's bishops went unpaid. Country churches were abandoned and fell into ruin from neglect. The institutions the church had built to fill social needs found themselves in need of the rarest commodity of the Great Depression: revenue.
In the 1930s, Methodism was really in a mess. Most churches didn't do what they referred to at that point as an every member canvass, what we think of now as an annual stewardship campaign. There were significant churches that had more debt than they could deal with, and it was in that environment that leaders of the church came together to think about the future of Methodism.
A handful of clergymen, leaders like A. Frank Smith, Hiram Boaz, and C.C. Selectman, along with laity such as A.J. Weeks, Walter Fondren, and J.J. Perkins, surveyed the situation in 1937. Their report concluded that the church needed to promote the Christian doctrine of stewardship. And so, we proposed the establishment of a Methodist foundation in Texas to aid our Methodist institutions in the achievement of their God-appointed missions. The Texas Methodist Foundation was chartered on March 4, 1938. In 1939, two of the foundation's founders, Fondren and Weeks, died, and the organization drifted. Then came World War II. Like the rest of the nation, Texas found itself focused on the war effort, diverting energy from the new foundation. War spending also mercifully relieved the economic hardship of the Depression, and the Texas Methodist Foundation became dormant, its urgency mitigated, perhaps by the changing tides of history.
There was a post-war boom in religion. They were gaining 3,000 to 4,000 members every year in the Texas Conference. There were finances increasing over $1 million a year every year.
Challenge at that point was that there was no operating budget. And so people like Grogan Lord, Eddie Skurlock, and other members of the board made the investment into the foundation, into the operating budget of the foundation, and made a multi-year commitment to do this.
The foundation came to life when they finally agreed to put some money behind it.
In 1957, the foundation was revived. A new energy returned the focus to stewardship, loans, and grants, providing a financial lifeline to the growing post-war church and its many endeavors.
This was an organization that really demanded competence, as exhibited by the fact that Monroe Vivian was hired to be that first CEO, who was a marvelous first chief executive for the Texas Methodist Foundation. I suspect that the next pivotal moment for the foundation was in the late 1970s. Charles Lang was hired as our third president of the foundation, following Don Redmond, who came after Monroe Vivian. At the time that Charles became president, the foundation had $4 million in assets under management. And frankly, it was again one of those times where the decision was having to be made, are we going to continue this organization or not? And Charles Lang, during the 16 years that he was with us, grew the foundation from $4 million in assets at the time that he took over to $104 million.
Charles Lang took us to a certain level that we weren't able to, no one else would have been able to take us to where we were. And then the hiring of Tom Locke allowed us to take us to continue that foundation growth to something else entirely. So again, a pivotal moment would be hiring of Tom Locke to allow the organization to become something different than what it was before. That stability allowed us to begin to think about other ways we can serve the church.
We started thinking of ourselves more as a ministry that happens to offer financial services than simply as a financial service provider.
We were able to take those risks, if you will. It was the use of money to be able to do other things that don't pay for themselves.
Today, the foundation is a vital resource to a dynamic and multifaceted United Methodist Church. Born almost exclusively as a financial organization, it now serves a much broader role, with programs that inventively support laity and clergy, physically, mentally, spiritually, all part of an organic outgrowth of that original mission. to aid Methodist institutions in their God-appointed missions.
University United Methodist Church, about 125 years old. Originally there was a neighborhood around here, and we were right next to a very small UT campus, but the whole community has grown since then, so we find ourselves basically as an urban church. And about 20 years ago we found that there were a lot of folks who, we call them the people who live under the stars, and that they were out here living on different campuses and were in need of assistance, food, clothing, those kinds of things. And so that's kind of how Open Door Ministry got its start. We are able to feed between 200 and 300 people every Saturday. We clothe 100 people. We provide other services for them, and we do it on this little shoestring budget from the church.
Several years ago, they realized they needed to do some renovation projects to their building. They had a campaign, they raised some money, but they needed some money to help them between when they started their construction and whenever they were going to collect all their campaigns. And we had the opportunity to help them and provide them a loan to do that renovation project.
Now we're taking this further step to actually remodel and renovate the kitchen.
As they looked at their renovation project, they looked at how could this renovation help them continue their ministries that they're currently doing, and maybe even expand those ministries.
We can have a kitchen that's actually up to code, and we can get food from the food bank and just prepare better meals for for all of our ministries, but especially for our folks who come in on Saturday mornings who are our guests.
Dear Lord God Almighty, thank you for the blessings of our gathering here this morning. Please bless those people out in the parking lot that are about to come in and help us to serve them with the love that you sent to us. In your Son Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We have a construction loan right now, and it's with TMF. So that'll go on for 3 years while we're raising money, and then we hope that we'll be able to use our own foundation to pick up the remainder of the loan. Of course, we hope that maybe it'll all be paid off, but if we need to, we'll be fine.
Here at Texas Methodist Foundation, we don't have shareholders, we don't have individuals who are looking for a return. What we have is an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. The spread that you make off of the loans is truly a ministry dividend. It's how we fund the different things that we do here at TMF. We have $320 million worth of loans outstanding, all across Texas, serving all 6 annual conferences. That represents about 450 individual churches who are truly sharing the hope of Christ into their community and to each and every person there. That is truly a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's about food, but it's really not about food. It's about building relationships, and it's about all of us helping each other and blessing them, but also receiving blessings every Saturday.
Y'all are here, we assume, because you love kids deep from your heart, and you want to work with them, and you want to enrich their lives in some way, perhaps become some kind of a touchstone for them as they move through life. That's an assumption. Am I off? Am I close? What do y'all think about that? Yeah?
Project Transformation sprung out of a conference sponsored by Texas Methodist Foundation. This is a really unique and collaborative ministry that engages 3 unique areas all in one mission. And we like to talk about it in terms of the 3 C's: children, college students, and churches. We hire about 100 college students every year to live in an intentional community, to run summer programs and after-school programs for low-income children and youth. And all of those programs are housed within urban United Methodist churches as a way for them to build relationships with children in their communities. And through the process, young adults' lives are transformed. They get a glimpse of the leadership that they're capable of in serving in their community. They get a sense of their own unique calls and how to live into those calls after this experience.
I mean, the attitude behind Love and Logic is love and logic. Love. That was dumb, man.
PT has just been super transformational for me. I remember being an intern in 2009, and just that first summer here was completely life-changing.
You see these kids grow up in the program and become the first in their family to go to college and come back not only to serve their community, to be a college intern with us and be a role model in the lives of another generation of children in that community, and to see that interaction between some of our kid turns, as we call them, that have been kids and now interns, be that example and let children in that community know there's another path out of maybe generational poverty that they've seen, and they've seen it from one of their own former kids in that community. We've seen that happen 12 times now.
It was during my first summer at PT that I started to feel called into ordained ministry, and since then I have been pursuing that.
It's a program that's addressing the needs of underserved children in the most economic depressed areas of our city. It's a program that's helping young adults discern calls to ministry, and it's a program that's helping churches be renewed and transformed to become vital congregations in those neighborhoods.
I'm telling you, a lot of our kids that come to our sites, their home is not always very safe and not very predictable, and not always a place they can't wait to go back to. So you are creating this really cool, safe place where you're in charge and things get done.
Project Transformation creates a space in which we're actually living out what I think we read in the scriptures. You know, we're going out every day and we're serving.
Why are we doing what we're doing? Everything. What is it? Because you love these kids and you want to see some kind of transformation.
One thing that we love about Project Hope and Project Next Generation is we give the opportunity to our congregation to look at themselves and look inward and find ways that they can use their gifts and talents to share with those that have obstacles in their lives and are having difficulty achieving goals and moving forward in their life. A lot of our volunteers that come into Project Hope or Project Next Generation may come in and they have a preconceived notion. People that are on welfare or people that are out of a job or are having difficult times, they may have this notion that they're lazy or that they're just not working hard enough. And then once our volunteers get to working with them and they sit down and meet with them and they talk with them and they share their struggles with them, then they realize that it's not just that simple, that it takes someone caring enough and to share their gifts and their talents and their time to make a difference.
Give with, selfless.
I remember when I first met Maribel, I could see a spark in her eyes that she really wanted to move forward and have the American dream.
I am the fourth one of 10 children. I am from Mexico. When I was little, I always dreamed of being a flight attendant. But when I graduated from middle school, I learned that we didn't have any funds to continue, so I couldn't. I started working when I was 12 years old.
She had to go to work in a factory to help support her family.
Then I moved to the United States and I started going to church. I became a Christian. Then I met my husband and we married. We started having children, and I would visit the clinic, the 14th Street clinic, where I met this wonderful lady. And she told me about Project Hope, and I said, oh, I wish I could study.
We did a contract through Project Hope, and where we decided how they were going to get to that American dream.
You know, my dream had always been to get more educated, get my high school a degree.
We started with getting her GED, and she worked with coaches, family faith coaches, tutors for math and for grammar, and she worked hard until she finally passed her GED.
I have been very blessed with all this group that are more than friends. They're like family. At first, I said I could only probably learn English and get my GED degree, but then they offered me if I could study whatever I want. So I decided, okay, I would like to graduate from college.
And then she went on to set the goal to get her associate's degree and go on to college.
I graduated from college, finally. Took me a long time. This is a very huge accomplishment, a dream that I had, and God has helped me. To Him be the glory, and all of you, thank you.
I thank the Texas Methodist Foundation for giving grants that enable churches like ours to be able to start programs and to fulfill the destiny that was meant for Maribel and her family.
My mom, she was really determined to do her homework, and the next day she would always come saying she got an A. And then whenever she graduated, she came home saying, I graduated with all honors.
They helped me accomplish my goal, and I am very grateful to Project Hope.
I don't hear narratives about people. I mean, in church it's changing. I hear the narratives of why people are leaving.
I'm not sure churches know the outcome. I'm not sure they know what they're trying to reach. I'm not sure they even know, my church, I shouldn't say they, my church, I'm not sure my church even knows that they don't have a purpose.
We're at a point where the church has disconnected itself from its environment. It is now 48 years since we have had a net increase of members.
We're a denomination that's unsustainable. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. We've been practicing it for too long.
When the resources begin to shrink, we stop counting. How many of you know a congregation that loved to count until they plateaued and suddenly couldn't find their tally book anymore?
The age gap is 22 years between the people in the United States who have an average age of 35 and United Methodists that have an average age of 57.
Finances are always a lagging indicator of whatever is going on. They are not a kind of a predictive kind of a trend. They're a lagging trend. I got to tell you how many congregations I've worked with who are paying their apportionments off their endowment. That is not a measure of vitality.
Over the next 15 years, we're going to lose a number of our congregations.
Most of the churches that I have worked with know more about who they were than about who they are.
And for the past 50 years, we've been basically going about business as usual. We've been worshiping as usual. We've been offering the programs as usual. We've been doing that which we're familiar with and comfortable with.
When the culture was pushing people toward us, it was very easy to receive people.
All of which means we have lost our connection with the culture. We have really separated ourselves from a culture that has changed around us. And in that kind of a setting, any living organism that separates itself from its environment begins to die.
I think what we need to ask is, what got you here? Yeah. What are you looking for? Because so many members say, we were looking for a traditional place, or, our friends were here.
We're here not simply in a workshop where an expert can teach other people some information, but rather we're trying to learn together.
But we're so about the maintenance of the institution that our vocabulary goes that way.
It isn't a matter of getting better at what we already do. It's a matter of questioning again, what's our purpose? And who are we? And these are kind of standard questions that happen when you're in the wilderness. This is the point of Walter Brueggemann, that every time the Israelites went out into the wilderness, they had to answer two questions again. And the one is, how will we now be with God, and how will we now be with one another?
When you're walking in the door, you may not know how to grow.
We really have to shift our focus away from the institution of the church to the purpose of the church. And that was really part of the genesis of the shift that Texas Methodist Foundation has been going through, having provided remarkable services to the church that have been to strengthen the institution of the church. In addition to that, now we've begun to pay attention much more to the purpose of the church.
One of the fundamental assumptions about Christian ministry that I think we have tended to forget is that it is about change. That the encounter with Christ is meant to change people.
There's a metrics conversation that we're now involved with because of the difficulty of metrics.
If the system gets what it measures, then we have to consider, what do you get if you don't measure anything?
It's this difference between counting and measuring. Right. We know how to count, but we don't know how to measure very well, or help people know the measures that will help them see that they're actually sometimes doing more than they think they're doing.
If the fundamental assumption about discipleship is about change, the fact that people are changed by their encounter with Christ, then we should be able to measure that change. We should have at least an intent of what that change would be. And so we need to be able to have some way of measuring, are we getting closer to it or not?
If we're going to count or we're going to measure, we need two specific components what is the unit that we're counting and what is the scale.
It's problematic. The church doesn't know how to do that. Nonprofits don't know how to do that easily. It's a major learning for us, and in which people are going to have to try some new things.
And so this issue about our purpose, our outcomes, and how do we measure how we get there is us trying to rediscover ourselves.
What we're really looking at here is trying to help our leaders become more vital. And in many ways, one of the things that means is become more courageous. If we are in a wilderness, if we're in this place where the reality that we're facing is one that we have not known in the past, that means that people have to learn new things, and they have to learn it with courage. And right now, the operational definition of courage that we're using with our bishops and district superintendents is learning how to lead without regard for reward. How do you lead without satisfying people's expectations for what was, when in fact we're being challenged to walk into God's dreams about what could be?
If you're doing membership ministry, then what you're doing is trying to gather people and keep them as satisfied as possible. If you're doing discipleship ministry, what you're doing is you're inviting people and then you're challenging them so that they are uncomfortable enough to change. Do you hear the difference? Mm-hmm. Do you hear that in fact we're now in a situation where we want to do a ministry with people that the folk who are already in the church perhaps do not want?
When you're not in the wilderness, when you know your territory, leadership is highly about problem solving. But when you're in a new territory, then it has to be about learning.
We understand that our primary work is not about saving the church as much as we love it and as close as it is to our hearts, but it's about doing the purpose of the church, which is being an instrument of God's mission in the world.
The church is not necessarily going to be the same as it once was. Young people are especially hungry and excited about missional opportunities to be hands-on in service in their communities, to be the church, not necessarily go to church. I think we have a lot of work to do still within the church to try and have those conversations, especially with young people.
One of the things that we're absolutely convicted in is the notion that conversation is the currency for change.
People who wouldn't otherwise come together and have conversation about how we can move into God's future with hope.
If you can get the right people around the table focused on the right question, wisdom will occur.
How are we going to make a difference in God's world?
We don't have to show up at that table with the answer, that we're trying to maneuver people toward an answer. All we have to do is show up with a good question.
I'm often asked whether or not I'm hopeful about the church. And the reality is I've never been more hopeful in my whole life's experience with the church. The kind of entry into the future is being led by a growing cohort of leaders that are practicing the kind of risk and courage that brings them to new possibilities.
It's riskier, hazardous to try to predict where the future may lie. But certainly there's a future for somebody who offers the kind of service that the foundation does. It's an idea whose time has come.
I believe that the work of TMF is beginning to have a ripple effect beyond the annual conferences and leaders in the state of Texas.
We've had almost a degree of reluctance to talk about ourselves as a source for people to give towards. Now we've made the decision that we are beginning to look at individuals to see if there is an opportunity that individuals can fulfill their philanthropic interests by supporting some of the services that we offer that can help those churches and congregations in Methodism across Texas and maybe beyond.
A door now is more open than it ever has been in the past.
We're living in a threshold time, so to think about TMF, I think of it as standing just slightly on the other side of the doorway, kind of beckoning us forward to come in to God's future, a future that's filled with promise and possibility.
As we think about the doorway into our next 75 years, my hope for Texas Methodist Foundation is that we will be able to continue to stand in the gap that exists between that world of God's imagination and the current realities of the world. The core values of this foundation, servanthood, competence, and integrity, will continue to grow ever stronger. We will always be more focused on what can we do for somebody else as opposed to what are they going to be able to do for us, and that our success will be framed around how good a job is the church doing toward becoming that church or that individual that God has given them the potential to be, and what sort of contribution are they making toward creating a better world.
Project Transformation exists today because of our relationship with Texas Methodist Foundation. Texas Methodist Foundation was the original key player that opened the door for ministry to happen in a new and bold and courageous way.
It just seems like TMF is always there when we need you, and it's a beautiful relationship because we feel like you care so much about the ministries that are going on here. You know what we're doing, that it just doesn't even seem to be an issue. It's just like, well, just sign these papers, but you all are fine.
Our staff is full of smart people with good hearts, people who deeply love the institution of the United Methodist Church, but who more than that love the potential that the church has for helping bring about a better world and better people.
Project Hope has opened many doors. One of them would be faith, hope, not only in me, but in my kids. My kids would see the difference. They would ask, Mommy, why do these people help us? And I go, because they love God. And since they love God, they love people.